Right.
This is the Stephanie Miller Show. Chris and Travis are sitting in for Mama today.
Hello.
Hi. Steph will be back with us on
Monday. Yes, we got a text from her last night saying she may be wearing sunglasses. So don't be afraid.
She's gonna be too cool for school.
Yes, but she will be back here on Monday, if barring anything out of the ordinary.
As long as things go the way they're supposed to.
Yep.
And I mean, obviously, what we're talking about is the big news from yesterday, the fourth January 6th hearing.
Well, it was hearing
number 4.
It was hearing number 4,
but third in chronological order.
Right, because hearing number 3 has been pushed off to next week.
This is kind of like when you watch. Have you heard about the machete order for Star Wars movies?
No.
Oh, so the machete order is episodes 1, 2, and 3 spoil the big reveal in Empire Strikes Back.
Right.
I'm your father, Luke.
Right.
So the machete version is you watch Star Wars Episode 4, A New Hope, followed by Empire Strikes Back, and you find out that Darth Vader is Luke's daddy. And then you go back and you watch 1, 2, and 3 to find out how Anakin Skywalker becomes Darth Vader.
Right.
And that makes Return of the Jedi make more sense.
Yes.
So that's what we're doing with the January 6th.
Okay.
So we're just going to jump back next week.
Yeah.
And we're going to talk about more of the stuff that led up to it and all the influence campaign and all the stuff that was going on with we heard a lot yesterday about these fake electors, the alternate electors, whatever you want to call them, the illegal electors.
Exactly. And Trump was told that over and over and over again before the riots.
Yeah. In fact, well, here, I want to hear, just because we're talking about fake electors and schemes and stuff like that, let's let Judge Ludick finish number 2.
To this very day, the former president, his allies and supporters pledge that in the presidential election of 2024, if the former president or his anointed successor as the Republican Party presidential candidate were to lose that election, that they would attempt to overturn that 2024 election in the same way that they attempted to overturn the 2020 election, but succeed in 2024 where they failed in 2020.
I mean, we've heard a lot of times people say, the first coup is just is where they learn the lessons.
Yep.
And they get it right the second time.
Yeah.
And we're seeing this already start to play out in these midterm elections with these MAGA candidates and these Trump loyalists and these big lie proponents getting into either state house offices or Secretary of State's races.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. And they're winning about half of them that they're running in.
And this is going... If this does not go unchecked, and this is part of the mandate of the January 6th committee, is to fix the system so what we saw 2 years ago now, what we saw happen does not happen again. And we all get wrapped up in this, the idea of getting Trump or, getting Eastman or whoever. But at the end of the day, the January 6th committee, what they can do is recommend legislative changes. And they have repeatedly said that is their focus.
Right.
And so I think what Judge Ludick is talking there and what we're seeing play out right now makes it all the more important that we not only get some proposed legislation on the table, we've got to get it through because we don't know what's going to happen in these midterms. It could go either way for us.
What legislation do you think they're going to propose?
Well,
what can they propose?
They've talked about reforming the Electoral College Act, and I don't know what else beyond that. But we've got to make sure that these states' electors represent the will of the voters in those states. And some of the secretaries of states that are running for office or who are the Republican nominees are saying that they will certify the way they want to certify, basically.
Okay.
So I don't know what that legislation is. That's why there are people in D.C. who do these jobs.
Yeah, I'm not sure there's much they can do because each state is responsible for its own elections.
Correct.
And I think it's kind of dangerous to move towards centralizing elections at a federal level.
But that's also what we've been talking about a lot with the John Lewis Voting Rights Act, and because that's what Republicans have been screaming about is the idea of federalizing elections. I'm not saying federalize elections, but we've got to maintain, or we've got to make sure that states are protecting the will of the voter. I mean, at the end of the day, we can't have, heaven forbid, Georgia Secretary of State Rassenberger, when Trump called him and said, "Find me these votes," thank God he didn't do that. It sounds like the people who are coming in next would be more inclined to do that, and we don't know what's going to happen when that stuff gets thrown into the courts and stuff. And these are questions for maybe Glenn Kirshner in hour 2.
Yeah.
But so that was yesterday, and we were talking about that you mentioned Trump knew.
Mm-hmm.
Let's play clip number 3. This is Cheney, and I believe she was
Liz Cheney.
Liz Cheney, and she is talking with Greg Jacob, who is Pence's attorney, who was testifying yesterday. Let's go with clip.
When exactly did President Trump know that it would be illegal for Mike Pence to refuse to count electoral votes? Here is one sample of testimony given by one of the witnesses before us today, the Vice President's General Counsel.
Did John Eastman ever admit, as far as you know, in front of the president, that his proposal would violate the Electoral Count Act?
I believe he did on the 4th.
That was January 4th, 2 days before the attack on Congress.
Trump knew. Let's move on to clip number 4. This is Eric Hirschman, who's talking about effing nuts plans, and he's talking about a conversation with Rudy Giuliani calling him prior to the 6th.
We had an intellectual discussion about Eastman's, I don't know if it's Eastman's theory per se, but the VP's role. And he was asking me my view and analysis and then the practical implications of it. And when we finished, he said, I believe that, you're probably right. I think he thought when we're done that it would be something he'd have to consider if he was sitting on the bench, but he'd probably come down in that, you couldn't interpret it or sustain the argument long term.
Of course, the fact that Mayor Giuliani seemed to admit that the theory was wrong did not stop him from going before the crowd just a few hours later on January 6th and saying the exact opposite.
That was Representative Aguilar, who was doing the questioning for that portion of the hearing, or leading that portion of the hearing. And one more real quickly. This is clip number 5. This is Mark Short, who is Vice President's Chief of Staff. He's that husky-eyed looking
the
dude.
bald guy.
Yeah. So anyways, this is him talking about, I believe this was Mark Meadows, who was also Trump's Chief of Staff.
You've been clear repeatedly with Mr. Meadows about you and the Vice President having a different view about his authority on January 6th.
I believe I had.
Did Mr. Meadows ever explicitly or tacitly agree with you or say, yeah, that makes sense, or okay?
I believe that Mark did agree.
What makes you say that?
I believe that's what he told me. But as I mentioned, I think Mark had told so many people so many different things that it was not something that I would necessarily accept as, okay, well, that means that's resolved.
All right, so that's, as far as I'm concerned, that's strike 1, 2, and 3. That's Eastman, Rudy, and Mark Meadows, arguably the people closest to Trump who were telling him or whispering in his ear that he could get away with this.
Yeah.
And Meadows, as Short points out there, sounds like Meadows was telling anyone who would talk to him what they wanted to hear at the time.
Absolutely.
Including Trump.
Yeah.
And telling
That's why Trump had him around.
Yeah. Oh, exactly. He wanted a yes man. That's exactly what I was looking for.
Trump only has yes men around. If you cross him, he gets rid of you.
Exactly. We've seen that many times.
Which is not a very stable leadership style.
That's not the best people.
No.
I personally want someone that will argue with me.
Absolutely.
Thank you. That's why Stephanie keeps us around, right?
Well, yeah. That was Lincoln's idea of a team of rivals.
Yeah.
It comes. You argue every the scenario that comes about.
Yeah. All right. Let's go. Since we have guests lined up for the rest of the show, I want to get some phone calls in here as quick as many phone
What's
calls.
the number?
In it is 323-410-0458.
Yes.
And we've already got a couple of callers on the line here, but let's start with Anita in San Antonio. Good morning, Anita.
Good morning, Travis. Good morning, Chris.
Hello.
You can regulate elections. I mean, what do you think the Voting Rights Act?
Right.
So, yeah, I mean, the federal government isn't saying that they're going to come in there and run the elections, but they can they can put things in place that make sure that they're fair and that they're not, there's no hanky-panky.
I agree.
Like that. Yeah, the Voting Rights Act is a prime example of that.
Yeah, no, 100%. But we also have a situation right now with the Supreme Court where they've invalidated parts of the Voting Rights Act.
That's right.
So we have to be concerned about what they're going to do.
Well, that's true, but the Supreme Court, when they struck down those parts of the Voting Rights Act, it wasn't because they were saying the states have the right to run the elections and you can't regulate them. what they said was, "Oh, well, everything's okay now. We don't need to be doing this anymore." Remember?
Oh, no,
somebody can.
I
Go
agree,
ahead.
but obviously things aren't okay now, and are they going to be okay in 2020 or this year or in 2024?
No, they weren't okay. That it's like somebody. I think it was Ruth Bader Ginsburg who said, it's like it's raining and the umbrella's keeping you dry, so you want to, you're going to put away the umbrella now because you're dry.
No, I agree,
So,
but that was the minority opinion. That wasn't the actual. That
Unfortunately,
yeah, but they struck it down. They didn't struck it down based on states' rights. They struck it down because they said we don't need it anymore. That's what John Roberts was saying.
Right.
You're right. This Supreme Court, we don't know. They're probably going to side with whatever voting restrictions are put in, or they're not going to side with us. That's for sure.
Right.
This is a really dangerous Supreme Court.
Yeah.
No, that's
But,
that's part of the problem that we're
I'm just
facing
saying-
right now.
But I'm just saying that we can regulate. Congress can regulate elections. The federal government can regulate elections. That's not what the issue.
To an extent.
To an extent. And
To an extent, they can't tell states how to count their votes, though.
we do have to be careful about this and make sure that it's how it gets fought in court.
What they can't do is they can't run the elections. They can't come in there and have federal employees running the elections. The states have run their own elections.
Right.
But the federal government, I mean, there were parts of the Voting Rights Act that weren't struck down that said, hey, if we find out, you're doing something that's discriminatory, you can sue. Okay? What they said was you couldn't do this. The federal government couldn't come in anymore and say, oh, you have to get approval prior to even putting this in place. That's what the Voting Rights Act used to say. That's the part they struck down because they said we didn't need it anymore.
Right.
They didn't say that the states didn't have a right to regulate elections.
Correct, but we're talking about the federal government putting these regulations in place. That's I agree with you that this is what we need to do, and I agree with you that the Supreme Court didn't strike it completely down. It's just I don't know if I have faith in the Supreme Court right now to make the right decisions, because if they do pass legislation through Congress to try and fix this, it will end up in litigation, and it will probably end up before the Supreme Court at some point. And
right,
I don't know how these fixes are going to hold.
But it won't be based on states' rights. They can't. That argument. First of all, right now they're deciding they're probably going to say New York can't put that the concealed carry permit thing, that they don't have a right to enforce that. So states' rights. I mean, this Supreme Court, of course,
they're going to say and do what they want to do.
Yeah.
That's the biggest concern right now. They're not acting on the law. They're acting on an ideology.
Right. But if it's too obvious, I mean, even then, like even when all those cases came before the Supreme Court about when Donald Trump, those cases that were just ridiculous, maybe, these type of things where the Secretary of State is obviously going to decide an election or be able to change the outcome of an election in the state if they want to. Maybe that the Supreme Court will draw the line on that. I don't know, but let's hope that they have that, they're at least that kind of integrity.
Yeah, no, I hope you're right. I hope you're right, Anita. And this is a soft break, so just tuck and roll as we drop you out of the car right now. Okay.
Okay.
All right.
You guys are doing a great job. Have a great
Thanks,
weekend,
Anita. You have a great day.